Hey guys, this is gonna be how to play the physical team in Arknights Endfield. A little bit of a disclaimer, like yes, you don't truly need a guide like this because the combat system in this game is pretty brain dead. Or at least you will get away with playing completely brain dead. It is literally just holding down the left mouse click, waiting for the game to tell you to press E, and then you do that. Sprinkle in a bunch of well-timed right clicks, I should say, for some perfect dodges, and you will beat the game, all the game's content, easily, right? But there can also be a little bit more to the combat system, and that's what I want to talk about today. So let's go over the physical team, consisting of Administrator, Pogranicznik, and Lefang. For team building in this game, the fourth character in your team doesn't really matter. I'm using Akikuri for her ultimate to recover me some more SP and make my life a little bit more convenient. But the fourth character can be whatever the hell you want, it doesn't matter. Okay, now let's start off by taking a look at Administrator. Here, of course, everyone has physical attacks. These basic attacks in this game matter because they tell you, they are the deciding factor of what character you play actively. Look here, as the controlled operator, those are how this game calls their characters, the final strike also deals 18 stagger. Keep that in mind for a little bit later. 18 stagger. Okay. Now, each and every character has one ability, and that's about it. For Administrator, our ability is to apply vulnerable to the enemy. We have to watch out here because we do not want to consume these stacks of vulnerable. If the enemy would already be vulnerable once we use this ability, we would consume the vulnerable stacks. That is not what we want to do. That is what we're gonna do with a different character. So we're gonna start off our rotation by using this very ability right here with Administrator. Okay, then we have a combo trigger. That is super important because it determines of whenever you can or cannot or should not use your ultimate ability. Because here, the very important note to take away is that this combo trigger applies crystals to the enemy and also additional stacks of vulnerability. That also comes in clutch sometimes because, more onto that when we talk about Pogranicznik. But here remember, the crystals are applied to our opponents. Why is that important? That is because of our ultimate ability, that if the enemy has crystals on them, this skill consumes these crystals and deals one more hit of physical damage. So a significant more amount of damage than without these crystals, and therefore you would never use your ultimate with Administrator if you haven't used your combo trigger before. So what is the job of Administrator? It is to apply vulnerable so that other characters can consume it. She is also, or he or she, depending on what you play, is a little bit selfish because combo trigger is only for herself basically, but remember the stacks of vulnerability, the additional stacks, right? This would not consume vulnerable stacks, but it would stack up on vulnerable. It's also quite important, but it is more about the selfishness of applying these crystals so that your ultimate deals more damage. Okay, now since we figured out that Administrator's main role here is to apply vulnerable, we gotta take a look at the character Pogranicznik, because that is the character in which we want the vulnerable stacks consumed with. Here also his basic attacks 18 stagger, keep that in mind. Here his ability consumes the vulnerable stacks, right? He applies breach, and it depends on how many vulnerable stacks on the enemy are. because these vulnerable stacks, they get consumed, and based on the number of vulnerability stacks that we consume, we recover more and more and more skill points, aka we gain cooldown reduction for ourselves. That is why we want to consume the stacks of vulnerability with Pogranicznik, because he would give us SP in return. Cool. Then we of course have to take a look at his combo trigger as well, as he performs a number of slash sequences based on the number of vulnerability stacks that this attack consumes. This also consumes stacks of vulnerability. So yeah, you don't have to pay too much attention to it, but it's definitely something to keep in mind here. And then his ultimate is, yeah, you can just use it whenever the fuck you want, and that adds convenience. The role that, or the job that Pogranicznik has in our team is to consume stacks of vulnerable and give us SP in return. Okay, then next up we have to take a look at the character Lifeng. That is the character that we're gonna play actively. That is gonna be the character that we control for the most part in battle, because you can see Administrator and Pogranicznik both would apply 18 staggers with their final strike. Lifeng does 19. Therefore, it is better to control her or him. It's actually a he. I always think this is a girl, but it's actually a guy. Femboy. Every single game needs to have one these days. Alright, so what is Lifeng here for? He is here to finalize our rotation. We use the skill with Administrator, apply vulnerable. We consume this vulnerable with Pogranicznik, and after we consumed the vulnerable stack from Administrator with Pogranicznik, Lifeng comes in and applies a debuff called Physical Susceptibility. That is very, very important. And you have to use her, his ability, excuse me, onto a target that has no stacks of vulnerability, because otherwise the physical susceptibility would not be applied. And after that we continue our rotation and repeat it. That is the constant cycle. What we're gonna sprinkle in are combo attacks and ultimates. And remember what I said earlier. It is not the case for Pogranicznik, but for Administrator as well as Lifeng, they both want to use their combo attack before they actually use their ult. That is incredibly important and a very, very effective way to min-max your damage. Here you can see that when the controlled operator performs a final strike on an enemy with physical susceptibility or breach, which we will always have, physical susceptibility is applied by Lifeng and breach by Pogranicznik, and we only need one of those, so we have it 100% guaranteed every single time. Then unleashes an aspect that performs a spear thrust to deal physical damage and grant ourselves Link. Link is very, very important, and that's why we want to use this combo trigger before we use our ultimate. Because, look, let's take a look at our ultimate here. If the skill consumes a link, if the ultimate consumes a link, it deals additional massive physical damage, is what it tells you here. And that is what you always want. You never want to use your ultimate onto a target that doesn't have the debuff Link applied to it. And you apply Link by using your combo trigger, right? There we go. That's about it. Of course, it knocks enemies down and stuff, so there's also some, yeah, CC, right? Some crowd control built in here. But the key point is the link and that you consume it to deal additional massive physical damage. And then last but not least, as I said, the fourth character in the team doesn't matter at all. I use Akikuri for her ultimate ability because that gives me some additional SP recovery, which I really love. Now the problem is, and something else that you have to know, there were characters that were nerfed coming from the beta into the actual game. Akikuri was a little bit too good because of her ultimate, so they raised her cooldown, right? Her ultimate energy cost is now 120 instead of 100 as it was in the beta, and you can really feel it, and it's a gigantic nerf. So yeah, you can use someone else as well, it doesn't matter. You can use, for example, Chen Kuan Yu. It's also, yeah, quite good, does some stuff, right? As I said, like, it doesn't matter, we don't have to take a deep look into it. So now let me show you briefly how these three, Administrator, Pogranichnik and Li Feng, actually look when you play them in battle. Here we are, and yeah, it is pretty simple, but let me show you this, right? When you engage the battle, you see, you want to engage the battle with the skill of Administrator to apply Vulnerable. That's what we do. You see the debuff on your enemies right here. They now have Vulnerable applied to them. The next thing that we want to do is use the skill for Pogranichnik to consume these stacks. Here we go, boom, you see, we did use the skill from Pogranichnik, and that consumed the stack of Vulnerable, as you just saw. And from this point onwards, what do we want to do, right? Did you pay attention? Answer the question. What are you going to do right now? Now, you're going to use the skill from Li Feng onto the target that just lost the vulnerability debuff to apply physical resistance down, so that your entire team does more damage on the targets that this physical resistance down is applied to. And that's it. You know, you see, I'm approaching and I'm using a skill from Li Feng. Yeah, okay, it wasn't right, the skill. Now I used the skill. I didn't have enough SP. But there you go, right? And that's literally about it. Everything else is, whenever you can use a combo trigger, you do so. Keep in mind that with Li Feng and Administrator, not with Pogranichnik, you want to use your combo trigger, or you have to use your combo trigger with Administrator and Li Feng before they use their respective ultimates. Do not miss out on this damage increase by doing this kind of combination. And that's about it. I hope that was fun and informative. If you like Arknights Endfield content in general, please consider leaving a follow on my channel. I would really appreciate it. But until next time, take care of yourselves, have a great day, peace.